Yeah? Okay. I'm Daisy. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm 18. And in September, I'm going to study Art Foundation at the London College of Communication. Thought I'd tell you about that. The first thing I want to do is tell you this is a history of feminist art. Yay. Not all of it, but the best bits, maybe, the highlights. There is a lot of nudity. It's a bit unavoidable. And there are also two specific images that are not very pleasant. They're a bit triggering if you have any kind of experience. Well, even if you don't have experience, but to do with rape and abuse, they're not very pleasant. What I'm going to do is, before they come up, I'm just going to let you know if you want to and they're next to each other, so it's like all in a block. That's the only unpleasant thing. You can either like excuse yourself or just look away, and we'll hopefully get through it together. So can we go to the next slide? No. It's like a space bar, I think. Okay, this is the only white cis man we're going to talk about today. Woo! Everyone else is not that. But he is a really nice white cis man. His name is John Berg. Oh, wait, okay, one thing I want to say. If you have a question about a specific piece that I'm talking about, just put your hand up and I'll answer it. If you have like a general question, like save it for the end. So this is John Berger. He is a poet, a Marxist, a feminist, an art historian, and he's like 88 now, and he's lovely. And he has a really amazing criticism of traditional art, like pre-20th century art. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, "You painted a woman naked because you liked the way she looked. Then you put a mirror in her hand and titled it Vanity." Can we go to the next one? This is a really famous painting, the Rokeby Venus. I think you probably recognize it, like even if you don't know about it, you recognize it. And it's like this really amazing thing because it's painted by a man, and it's all about the man's desire for her, and yet he turns it into her love of herself. And I think that just really speaks really loudly to me that women's representation in art prior to the 20th century was all about being the object, and being the object is actually, the subject of a painting is not actually that flattering. Can we have the next one? This is just a Google search of women mirror painting, and it's ridiculous. That's a Lautrec, he's pretty famous. That's a Degas, that might be a Rubens, I'm not sure. That guy's really famous for painting people super fat and weird. But like, it's ridiculous that this is kind of this archetypal image of the woman loving her body, you know, being so like vain, which is a woman's sin, even though it's the man painting her, the man loving the way she looks, the man wanting her. And John Berger really highlights this. You should read his book, Ways of Seeing. It's really good. And he has one specific essay all about women and their representation. Another thing he brings up, he basically says that these nude paintings, they aren't refined, they aren't, haughty or anything like that. They're basically like lads' mags. They're the same thing, except they were for the super rich. Like, super rich lord or baron or whatever, he would commission an artist to go and paint him a picture of a sexy naked woman. And the woman, so one of the things you find is a lot of these women don't have a lot of body hair. It's actually symbolic in art for a lack of sexual libido. It actually means that you don't have your own sexual desires, which is really interesting now that we're encouraged not to have so much body hair. It showed that the woman was an object of the man's desire. And often, if a woman was engaging in sex, like a sexual act with a partner in a painting, she wouldn't be looking at her partner, she'd be looking out at the viewer. It's kind of this idea of, which is really pornographic. It really resonates with porn today. It's she really just wants the white guy looking at her, not really the guy she's with. And actually, this doesn't occur as much in Eastern art. Eastern art's a lot better. They usually have women really engaged with their partners, but it's a real common thing in Western art because basically they're all just porn. And one last thing that John Berger says, which is amazing, is that men act and women appear. And what he means by this is that women are so aware of their actions, they're so aware of the way they look, they're so aware of the way that they're seen by the world, that they can never just, or they find it very difficult to just act freely. Men will just act because they want to act, but women are always hyper aware of how they're perceived. And this really resonates in art because, especially in feminist art, because a lot of it's about representing yourself and showing yourself and understanding how your work is perceived. Okay, can we have the next slide? So I'm going to go through pre-feminist artists. They're not pre-feminism, they're pre-feminist art. So it's kind of like pre-1960s. And these women, I feel, although they're amazing artists, they're not necessarily out-and-out feminists, or their art isn't their out-and-out feminism. Can we have the next one? So first up is Georgia O'Keeffe, who you probably know. Why have I done these so big? And the thing about Georgia O'Keeffe is, you know, it's kind of a joke, like, oh, like everything she does is a vagina. And it is a joke, but it's also not a joke because she was kind of in that atmosphere where her sexual and feminist expression had to be muted. It had to be subvert, not overt, and like she wasn't in a position where she could just openly throw a thing out there. Can we have the next one as well? This is also by her. This is called Wave with a Dot. We all know it's a tit. Like, she's not fooling anyone, but it's this kind of, this area, or this kind of atmosphere of women's sexuality being really implicit. And one thing I'm going to say is, a lot of the time throughout this talk, I'm going to reference the female body, and I do mean the cis female body because that's at the time what they were talking about. I may be a bit haphazard with that kind of use of that language. Please excuse me. Okay, next one, please. This is obviously one of the greatest artists of all time. My personal favourite, Frida Kahlo. And she is amazing because of her self-portraiture, definitely. I think that's what everyone kind of knows her for, and her kind of involvement in the Mexican muralist movement, which is really important, and revolutionary ideas. Hi. And what's really amazing here is, you know, she expresses her personal life, her disability, her sexuality, her relationship with Diego Rivera, and her relationships with everyone else, and Leon Trotsky and all those people. It's just great. This is also really gorgeous, this one. I forget what it's called. Maybe The Broken Column, I think, because she's naked, but she's not naked in a sexual way. She's bared her body in an expression of her own pain, of her disability, her chronic illness. And it's, I don't know, something really poignant about, after hundreds of years of women's bodies being displayed in an object way, for a woman to display her own body in a personal way. And it's really like, although now maybe it doesn't seem that radical, at the time it really was. And can we have the next? Thank you. And this is another painting by her, not as well known, and I think it's her most sexual painting. The story about this, I don't even know what it's called. It was meant to go in like the Mexican president's, where he stayed, like the White House, but for Mexico. And the Mexican president's wife was a bit of a prude, and Frida Kahlo hated her. And so she was commissioned to do this painting, and she made it the most sexual thing possible without being sexual. So you've got all these like beautiful ripe fruits, and then like the squash, which has kind of like got its seeds in it. It's like a womb-like thing. I'm getting a bit artsy-fartsy here. There's a moth up the top, and that's like darkness, night, male sexuality. And then there's a butterfly on the right. It's a bit yellow, so you can't see it, which is like female sexuality, like light and daytime, and they come together to make this whole. And this is her only painting that is a circle, and it's kind of like a pregnant belly, I think. Maybe that's just me. And it's just really great. I just like to imagine Frida Kahlo thinking about the Mexican president's wife and being like, bitch. So next up. Okay, we have... Oh, wait, no, just one thing about Frida Kahlo that I want to say is, although she's amazing, and today we think, oh my God, Frida Kahlo, at the time, she thought she was so inferior to her husband. She has a painting called Diego and I, where she paints a picture. She paints herself, but she paints him here on her between her eyebrows as her third eye, and it kind of symbolizes that he is the intellectual superior. His talent is superior, which is really funny because like no one remembers him that much outside of maybe Mexico, where he's a big figure. But what I want to express is like at the time, women were still really like not behind the men in talent, but behind the men in appreciation. Speaking of, this is Tina Modotti, who was Italian, and then she worked for the Comintern. And she's an amazing photographer, and she had two periods, her romantic and her revolutionary periods. Her romantic, she went to Mexico, and she actually, despite being always overshadowed, in America, she was overshadowed by her partner, Edward Weston, who was American, and like everyone says, like, oh, he took all the photos. And it's like, did he? He only liked to take photos of like fields, where she took like these really gorgeous things. But in Mexico, she became one of the leading photographer of the Mexican muralist movement, which is a big deal because men really dominated that. So her romantic period was all about the people of Mexico, the culture, and then her revolutionary period, quite clear there what she's talking about: peasants, army, Russians, just general. But she's really interesting, and she's not that well known, which is a shame, even though actually I think she was really influential. Okay, this is by Remedios Varo. She wasn't Italian, she was maybe Spanish, I don't know. She was an anarchist, and she was a surrealist, and she was really downtrodden by her male surrealist peers. Like, she really was poorly treated. And it led to her only painting androgynous figures, which is but she gave them, I don't know, if you go and find a picture of her, she gave them the kind of same features that she had, like high cheekbones, like kind of aquiline features. So like, they're androgynous, but they are her. But that's the only way she could really get away with it without her surrealist peers being like, oh, well, she's a woman and she's painting paintings about herself. And the thing I want to say about these are the last of my pre-feminist artists, is that their politics was focused on not feminism. Like Frida Kahlo and Tina Modotti were very communist. Remedios Varo was very anarchist. And I feel like this was at a time when feminism, it wasn't viable for feminism to be your main political goal, or you wouldn't be taken seriously in activist spaces or revolutionary spaces, as they've probably been called. And I think that's where you see like a really big change going on into the 60s and 70s, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So these are the first generation of feminist artists, but they're in the second wave of feminism, and they're controversial, but I think you have to appreciate that what they did at the time was like completely different to anything that ever been done before. Okay, next. So this is really amazing, and it links to something that I'm going to show you later, so remember it. It's by Betty Saar, and it's called Black Girl Window. And it's, I think, one of the things that it really represents is how this movement itself portrayed not just one woman, but every woman of that group. Frida Kahlo's work was about Frida Kahlo. Although you can relate to it, it's about her. I feel like this is representing black women in America. That's what she was doing. This girl who is faceless apart from two dark eyes that kind of look through to the window. She's not Betty Saar, but she's all the black girls at that time in America. And you have all the things she sees. You have the mysticism of like the maiden mother crone symbol, the stars and the moon. Like, they kind of look a bit tarot cardy, and in the middle is death. It's this, this bleak outlook that people have. And I don't think till then there'd been a great representation of black women in art, in Western art, at all. Okay, next, please. Another black female artist, Carrie Mae Weems. So it says, I don't know if you can read. Looking into the mirror, the black woman asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the finest of them all?" The mirror says, "Snow White, you black bitch, and don't you forget it." And it's like really powerful because this is, again, it's a self-portrait, and yet it speaks to a whole group of people. And I think that's what people weren't used to. Also, the use of typography is really interesting because that becomes a staple of feminist art. Typography, I don't know why, if someone has an idea, but typography becomes a staple of feminist art because it just so succinctly portrays an idea, a thought, a statement. I think feminist art also like shucks off all this, like, at this point, shucks off like subtlety. It's like, subtlety is for men hiding their lust for women. We're going to be out there, we're going to be serious, and if we're saying something, we'll just say it. And the next one, two more pictures by her, which I just think are really, really gorgeous, that I will just show you for a minute. Okay, next. So I'm going to talk about four performance art pieces by 4 different artists. There are loads of performance artists. There are loads of pieces I've missed out, but here we go. This is Shigeko Kubota doing a vagina painting. It's really amazing because it's like in direct contrast to Jackson Pollock, who dripped like paint onto things. She used red paint as well. I feel like that's kind of symbolic. And she's saying like, oh, his work is like an ejaculation, whereas mine is like a giving birth. And she criticised the Western view of having a vagina as a lack of a penis, which she felt like was a really Freudian thing. Is like, oh, like women have penis, everything. And it does look a little bit like a penis. It's not in her vagina. It's attached to her knickers, just so like everyone knows. And basically, it's also like that would look really hard, like she's squatting and stuff. But all her male peers hated it. All of them hated it. They thought it was disgusting. But I think it's really beautiful. Can we have the next one? This is Yoko Ono, who you know. This piece is Cut Piece. And she basically invites the viewer to cut away her clothes till she's naked. And it challenges this idea that, oh, as a viewer, we're neutral. You know, this person is doing this out of choice. I think it really challenges like our understanding of nude images and paintings, because also a lot of the women in nude paintings could be prostitutes or could be the lovers of the painter, and they're often mistreated. Like Dante Gabriel Rossetti, he painted his lover naked and then he painted over her face with a different woman's face, and it's like, really? She's kind of challenging, well, you feel like you're not actually doing anything as a viewer, but you are kind of stripping the woman, you are stripping this person, and like you need to accept responsibility for what you look at, for what you view, what art you consume, which I think is really interesting. Next. This is Linda Montano, and she is Chicken Woman. There's one of her many, many personalities, but she was really sick of the stuffiness in the art world, which it can be really stuffy sometimes. It's not so much anymore, because stuff like this happened. And she just went around and acted crazy, and she said it gave her the freedom. And I think, like, when you're a woman, women aren't funny, you know, women can't be, like, laddish, and it's, like, actually, ridiculousness is really freeing and also really important. And this is really beautiful. It's on the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's chicken dance, and it's like a physical exorcism of all the people who committed suicide there. It's something silly, it's something ridiculous, but it's also something really meaningful and beautiful. Next. And this is Adrian Piper. And I feel like with modern art, you get this thing where it's like, oh, she wore a wet paint shirt. But then you think about it again, it's like, oh, she's a woman wearing a wet paint shirt in public. It's about not touching, it's about bodily autonomy, it's about, kind of actively being there, like, stand away from me, this standoffishness that we're not really afforded as women. And I really love it, and she does some really amazing work. What I want to say about performance art is, I think performance art is the first time when women actually dominated the game. Women are just like, I don't know if we're inherently better at it, but I think it's like this part of this, like, women are so aware of how they appear, you know, men act, women appear, that there's this predetermined understanding of how you portray yourself, and then going and taking that and subverting it and being really honest about it. Like, I definitely think we've all walked down the street and just gone like, everyone just leave me alone, just leave me alone. Like, on my way here yesterday, some guy like grabbed me and was like, we'll have a family together, like you and me. I was like, just for God's sake. And I definitely feel like we've all felt this, and like, it's just really, I don't know, powerful to see it out there. And I think, yeah, performance art is amazing. It's simple, it's effective, and women are amazing. And all of these, like, a lot of these women aren't that well remembered. And there are other female performers, I was like Marina Abrilla, you know, and it's such a shame that we're not, I feel like we need to reclaim it and get back to it. Okay, next. This is by Barbara Kruger. Again, it's typography, which I feel like, you know, she really reclaimed it. Well, she really claimed it for herself. This kind of work, but she also, she did a really famous one of Malcolm X, which I couldn't find. But if you can go look for Barbara Kruger, Malcolm X. And it's this very, like, propaganda-ish, kind of a bit dystopian, it scares me a little, but it's like a very angry statement, and I really feel it, I I don't know, it feels like a little bit hateful. Do you know what I mean? Because it's all like red and black and horrible, but it's also really empowering. She kind of takes that negative energy, she kind of takes that darkness and just throws it out there. Next is another typographer called Jenny Holzer, who you probably have heard of, maybe, or you'll know one of her pieces even if you don't know it. And she's a bit more personal than Barbara Kruger, I would say, but she still has that really strong, angry vibe. She did projections and then she did big signs, but my favourite work of hers is on the next slide. And these are her inflammatory essays. I can't really read that from here, but it's basically just her just having a rant, and I feel like it's the feminist, but also the very personal feminist rant just come to life and put on a page. And also, this is like an amazing piece of art, but anyone here could do this. That's kind of what I want to express to you today, is like the best feminist art is stuff that you can all do, and like you should do it, even if you're not an artist, just do it. And it's just a really beautiful expression of like hatred and pain and anger on this like lovely crisp pink piece of paper. Okay, next. Thank you. This is one that's a bit nasty, and the nastier one is coming up. This is Nan Goldin, and she basically, when she was 17, just started photographing her life, all over her life. She spent a lot of time with drag queens, she was friends with them, and this is a rather unpleasant image of her after she was beaten that she took herself. And it's this really frank, really intimate thing, and it follows that kind of second wave feminist principle of the personal as political, but the person is also really artistic. The next one that's coming up is really unpleasant, so I would warn you to look away now. Okay. This is called Rape Scene by Anna Mendita. She made it in 1973, and basically she was at Iowa campus, and a fellow student was raped and murdered there. And she basically created loads of these scenes. She would photograph herself lying in a ditch. But this one in particular, her biggest one, this was her own apartment. She invited a bunch of her friends and colleagues and like other students to come, and they opened the door, and this is what they found. It is her, and she did this to herself because she just was refusing to accept the silence that the university wanted. And it really reminds me of, I can't remember the name of the woman, but I think you've all probably heard of her, the girl who carried around her mattress. It's this... Thank you. But, and the fact this is 1973 and, like, someone's doing this again is really, really painful. Okay, we'll move along. Okay, this is Susan Hiller, and she's one of my favourite ones. And I've tried to give all of these a theme, but this one's just kind of stuck in there because I love her. But these are self-portraits, and she just scribbles over them because I think it's this kind of rejection of, like, being seen, this rejection of having this innate womanhood that you can't ever, like, shake off. Like, I feel sometimes when you're a woman, it's, like, a bit of a burden because you're always being looked at, you're always being judged, and it's tiring. And this is titled fantastically, Sometimes I Think I'm a Verb Instead of a Pronoun, which is probably my favourite thing I've ever heard. Next. Now, this is... You're good. Susan Hiller and this next artist, they kind of straddle, they're getting into the 80s, so they kind of straddle second and third wave. Helen Chadwick created a piece, not this piece, called Of Mutability, and in it she used her naked body, and that was around 1986. And afterwards she felt really horrible because she had a real niggling feeling. She said, I didn't want it to be sexual, and yet everyone saw it as sexual, and she's like, I didn't feel like there was any possible way for me to use my body in art without it being sexualized. And then she came up with this, which is called Viral Landscapes, and she takes a picture of the sea, part of the coast, and then she sifts the picture through water and then puts paint on the water of that sea. But also these splodges you see, they are parts of her cervix, her ear on a microscopic level, and it's this really, really interesting way of portraying yourself, but with no one can sexualize that. You can't. You can be kinky, but that's a bit much. But I think it's really powerful. It's kind of also she herself has infected the landscape, and it's a place where she's been, where she's created this work, and it really speaks to me. Okay, so next. third wave feminism and art or post-feminist art. Also, I personally subscribe to the fact that we're in fourth wave, because I don't really like third wave. So that's how I'm going to structure this. Okay, the next one is another Helen Chadwick, because she made it in the 90s, but it's great. Next. These are called piss flowers. My favourite thing about this is this page that I have here, because I did my notes in my book, and I was reading it on the train, and it just has piss flowers with an exclamation mark, and the guy next to me on the train was really weirded out. He was like, what is this girl doing? Basically, Helen Chadwick, and I think her husband, went into the snow one day and pissed in it. And then where they created a dent in the snow, they filled it with plaster. And they created these beautiful flowers. And it's my favourite thing because it's just like, it's really gross. It's really gross, and, you know, a woman doing something really gross but creating something really beautiful. And also, like, I feel like pissing is a really male thing. You know what I mean? Like, pissing outdoors, that's kind of... but, yeah, I think that's really important. So next. This is by Janine Anthony, and it's called Gnaw, and it's basically, I think it's chocolate. It's a big block of chocolate, and she did just chew at it. And I think she did one of, like, butter, which is, like, hilarious. It's hilarious, but also it's this really amazing comment on women's relationship with food, which I think we all have a feeling about. And also, this is what I take from it, but that's because it's, like, my aesthetic, is that women are this kind of, like, this archetypally motherly, oh, you create life, and, you know, you're a protector, you're a nurturer. She's just taken this thing, and she's actually just, like, messed with it. She's just, like, destroyed it and fucked it up a bit. And I love that. I love when women get really destructive, because it's something that we're not supposed to do as women. It's something that's a very, like, male attribute. Okay, next. Jenny Savile, who you probably have heard of. I just can't not mention her. You know, she just paints flesh in this really female flesh and, like, all flesh in this really, like, crude way, I would say. And, like, this is actually quite, in terms of, like, brushstrokes, this is really refined, but a lot of her other work is very, like, sharp brushstrokes, and it kind of gives a sense of something not perfect, not sweet and tender, something very, like if you touched it, it would be a bit like, oh, which is a good thing, because, well, and I thought I would just mention her. Next is, okay, this is amazing, Lorna Simpson. So this really, to me, speaks of the Bechusar portrait, because you have, well, this is the back of the girl's head, but it's another, like, faceless black girl, and it says, eyes in the back of your head, and I'm just remembered, I was, like, thinking about it this morning, I was like, oh, there are little eyes in the Bechusar picture. I don't know if she purposely did this, but it's about this feeling that, as a black woman, you have to constantly watch out for yourself, that you don't feel protected, you don't feel supported within the society you're in, and the use of, like, natural, like, afro hair, like, as kind of a beautiful, like, golden gild around it, but also as kind of something holding you down and locking you in. But yeah, next please. This is by Coco Fusco, and she's from somewhere in Latin America, I don't know where, but she was talking about the whole of Latin America, and she said that although they, like, have a really strong culture of, in the very Catholic countries, a strong culture of worshipping virgins and, like, St. Mary, they don't care for women until they're dead. And it's called Better Yet When Dead. She felt that the rape and murder of so many women went unnoticed. You know, they weren't doing anything to prevent it, but when the women died, they would be, they would mourn her so heavily, but they weren't no one was taking any action to stop it. Okay, next. Okay, this is by Annie Sprinkle, who was a porn star in the 90s, and she called this her post-porn modernist show. I'm a little bit iffy about this. I don't know how I feel about it, but I thought I'd tell you about it. Basically, she would douche in front of the audience, and then she would use this, like, metal contraption to open herself up. You can see, like, the actual image if you go and Google it, to show people her cervix, and she would just invite people to come and have a look in her cervix. And she said, like, she was reclaiming her sexuality and she was, like, subverting the porn industry. I don't know. You can make your own mind up about that. But next, is one of the YBA young British artists. This is Sarah Lucas. Again, like I feel like 90s feminist art is really defined by being a bit crude and a little bit gross. And I don't know if I like it or not, but we all know what that is. And Sarah Lucas, you know, famously put eggs on her tits and took a picture of it. And she was clothed. It was just eggs on her shirt, really. But yeah, she's a bit forgotten as a YBA, like young British artist. She's a little bit pushed to the side. Okay, next. Tracy Annan, who you probably all know, even though she's a Tory. I know she's a Tory, but we need to appreciate her contribution to feminist art and the fact that she was the most prominent woman in the YBA. Probably the most important person in the young British artists anyway, because a lot of them suck. You know, this is the tent of everyone she ever slept with, I think. Really love to meet them. But it's just a really, or maybe it's not the tent of everyone she ever slept with, because I think that's... It is, thank you. And it's just really gorgeous because it's like patchwork and it's quilting and it's like this really feminist art, well, this really feminine art brought into a kind of crude sexual thing. Can we have the next one? I have a lot of her pictures up here, but and the bed gets taken the piss out of it, and I will not stand for it. The bed is so important because the history of a woman's bed in art is like endless. There's so many paintings of women's beds, so many paintings of like women in their bed, women's boudoirs, and then she takes this bed and she's like, this is really gross. A woman's bed can be really horrible. You got your absolute, I think there's slippers, papers. Great. I actually wish my bed looked like this. My bed is worse than this. My bed doesn't even have a sheet on it. But I think it became that staple thing that you take the piss out of. Like, oh, there's a pile of bricks in the Tate Modern, or there's a bed and she got out of it. But actually, it's really powerful. It's a kind of catalogue of the chaos of her life. Oh, hi, yeah.
Yeah, I think another really important thing to say about it is that was basically the aftermath of a really long depression.
Yeah.
She stayed in her bed for ages.
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you.
And also about the tent, it's not actually exclusively sexual.
Oh, okay. See, this is... Thank you, because I wasn't sure. Okay, because I was thinking, I was like, Tracy Horn, I've definitely read her biography and she didn't sleep with Tracy Horn or someone. But thank you for that. Next. And it's one last Tracy Annan portrait, because drawing. I guess I kind of wanted to show you one of her drawings, or it might be an etching, because I'm not very good at research. But just because I think it does have this very crude, childish style to it, which doesn't illegitimize it at all. I think it's just really speaks of the time and that movement. Okay, next, please. Fourth wave feminism and art. That's you guys, and me. Next. Okay, this is Giuliana Huxtable. She's American, I think. She's a transgender artist, and she's fantastic. She did this based on this weird mythology that a certain culture has, which I've forgotten, that black people are all aliens that are really green-skinned. It's really odd, and she just finds it hilarious, so she did it. And the next one, which is also of her, she 3D printed herself to full size, and I really like it because it's and she just put it right in the middle of the exhibition, because it's this really because it's full size, it's exactly what she looks like. That's her exact body. If you laid her next to it, it'd be like, oh wow, that's how thick her thigh is, that's how big her feet are. And I love it because it's just taking up space, and it's very noble. It's demanding respect and adoration. Okay, next. I need to turn my page. This I really identify with. But it's by Aviva Olenek, and all of her typography work is embroidery, which I think is really beautiful, because the typographers I showed you in second wave feminist art, it was very aggressive. It was very, very loud, all caps, all this stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And of the time, that's really important. But I think this is kind of a reclamation of femininity and what it is. Actually, you don't need to be the big, strong woman sometimes. Sometimes you can be catalogue of disasters, or really sad, and she does little things about, like, he didn't text me back, and it's like, yeah, but also yeah. Okay, next. Okay, this is Nikki S. Lee. Fantastic. She's a photographer who doesn't take photographs. So basically, she gets other people to take photographs of her. She gets them to, like, she dresses exactly how she wants, she frames it, she sketches it out how it should be, and she says she doesn't even own a camera, which I think is great. Well, I'm a photographer, so I'm a little bit upset, but also it's great. And the most amazing thing about this is you see someone's arm around her, and then what you do if you see this when it's not a white background is this is like has a little white border, this bit doesn't, and it's physically cut, and it's this like idea of like severing the, I think, man out of her life. And it's really lovely because it's just really subtle kind of message. I mean, you can tell she's pissed off about something. But I think we're going back to subtlety in some ways. I think we're like thinking actually like feminist art doesn't need to be really crude and really loud. We can be subtle and as respected. But okay, next. Laurel Nakadante, I'm terrible at this. She takes photographs of herself. I think this is called Lucky Tiger. And then she puts these really like nasty, like grease stained fingerprints on them, like and like dirt. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys have ever been in an industrial warehouse. I have. And generally what happens is all men work there. You walk into the office bit and there's a naked picture of a woman like just like right at you, and it's really graphic and horrible and it just makes you uncomfortable. I've done that a lot of times. And it kind of really speaks to me of that, of like this kind of really gorgeous woman, but in a kind of sexual, like, being touched. Even when she's photographed, she's being touched and owned and all this kind of stuff. And muddied, I guess. Yeah, okay, next. Okay, this is by Natasha Organ. She's a Nigerian artist. I wanted to put, she does embroidery, which is amazing, and it's all about heritage and womanhood and how they interlink. But she has an amazing photograph, because she does stage photography as well, called, and I'm going to post it to the group actually, is what I'm going to do. It says, "Will I still carry water when I'm a dead woman?" And it's really powerful, and it although we had like a lot of room for black and like Asian, any women of colour in feminist art, it's always been when they've been living in the West, I feel. And she's really bringing, like, she's reclaiming the country, not just her race, but the country itself and the importance of that. Okay, next. Oh, this is just really clearly, like, influenced by Jenny Holzer. It's by this artist called Samantha Collins. She's really young. She's, like, the same age as us, and she's part of Bunny Collective, which I suggest you all check out, because they do, like, exhibitions around the UK, and they're really cool. And it's just really lovely. And last one. This is about you. Basically, women are the majority of art students. We are like 80% to 20%, but when you get out of art school, you become the minority. And I know a lot of you aren't going to art school, but that doesn't make you not an artist. So I would just say to you, do whatever you want. It's art if you say it is. You're all very intelligent, interesting people. I've met most of you, and the rest of you, like, you're here, so whatever. And don't be afraid, because I think men and, like, old stuffy people are always going to tell you that, you know, like, your art about, you know, like, your breakup or how you feel about chicken is not good enough. But there's this really amazing thing that they talk about photography, in that I could take a photograph of this pen. This pen doesn't mean anything, really. Actually, it's the pen I did all my exams with, so it does mean something. But this pen doesn't really mean anything. But the fact that I took a photograph of it makes it mean something. The fact that you find something important enough to record makes it important. It's the value you assign to things that makes them art worthy. And that is what I was going to say. Thanks.